The Asics Novablast 4 is not a total overhaul of the Novablast 3, and it definitely continues the heritage of the Novablast series, but there are a lot of elements borrowed from the Superblast here, which make the version 4 a much better Novablast. The Novablast 3 was a very challenging shoe for me. It just never worked for me. I tried because a lot of people love that shoe, but it just never worked for me ever. Now, if you're interested in that full journey, I'll put 2 videos in the description that kind of give you the start to finish with the Novablast 3. But yeah, it just wasn't the shoe for me. So when the Novablast 4 started leaking on the internet a few months ago, I thought I wasn't going to be interested. I knew I was going to have to cover it because it is such a popular shoe and many of you love the Novablast series. But I didn't expect anything out of the shoe. And when I found out that it was going to be on sale at the New York Marathon Expo, I knew I had to get a pair, which I did. And now that I've spent about 50 kilometers or a little bit over 30 miles in the shoe, I can honestly say I love the Novablast 4. Let's start with the specs on the shoe. Now we have 41.5 millifoam in the heel, 33.5 millifoam in the forefoot, giving you an 8 mil drop. Now this shoe looks like it's grown, it looks like there's more foam in the shoe, but there's actually not. It's the same specs as the Novablast 3. The change here is that Asics now reports their stack heights like the rest of the running shoe industry, meaning they include the rubber outsole and the insole in their specs. So no changes from the Novablast 3 as far as the geometry of this shoe. The shoe has gained a little bit of weight. We're at 255 grams or 9 ounces on the dot, which is a few grams more than the Novablast 3, but you're never going to notice a difference. This shoe feels just as light, just as easy on the foot as the 3 did. 2 other changes to this shoe from a spec standpoint is that we now have FF Blast Plus Eco foam throughout the entire midsole. Now, FF Blast Plus Eco is a foam with 20% biomaterial in it, which does change the foam a little bit, and we'll get to the changes a little bit later in this video. And the other big spec change is on the width of this shoe. In the forefoot and the heel, this shoe has gained about 5 or 6 millimeters in both, making it on par, I believe, with the Superblast. So this has gained a lot of stability, especially on that initial foot strike, which benefits the shoe considerably. Moving to the upper of this shoe, we now have a woven upper, which is a change from the engineered mesh upper that was on the Novablast 3. But honestly, it feels the same. I don't think you're going to notice any difference. It's still a very soft, well-built upper. Moving to the tongue is changed considerably from the Novablast 3. Gone is that really stretchy neoprene tongue. We still have a neoprene material, but it's much thicker and there's more padding into it. It's not thick enough where it's going to get in the way, but it feels really good. It's also a one-piece tongue that's gusseted, so around about mid-eyelet, there is a band that runs along and really helps to kind of lock your foot down, which is a really nice feeling. The heel padding and the heel counter are just as padded, and it's nice to see the heel counter in this shoe having a proper Achilles flare, because I thought Asics designers were going for Achilles torture devices for a lot of their shoes, because most of the shoes from last year, except for the Superblast, irritated my Achilles. I'm happy to see that this one won't. Heel lockdown is great. The tongue is great. And I'm going to say that the toe volume in this shoe, I don't think is wider than the Novablast 3. In fact, I wouldn't even really call this a wide shoe. I do think there will be a wide version of this shoe because Asics does generally offer wide versions of the Novablast. But this shoe, I wouldn't call it narrow, but I'm not going to say it's wider, and it doesn't feel any wider to me than the Novablast 3. But where there is a change here is that the toe box of this shoe does feel a bit higher volume. There's more vertical volume in it, and I think the way that it sits on your toes is much better. It doesn't seem to collapse down on my toes like it did in the Novablast 3. And some of that is to do with these little ridges that are, I think, designed in here, which help keep the toe box up and off of your toe, which is really good. Now, Two problems I do have with the upper are really this eyelet chain. I think this eyelet chain is just way too complicated, and I don't think it does a good job of offering a great lockdown experience from a lacing standpoint. And also, this shoe has those same springy laces that were on the Novablast 3, which just, I don't know why they're springy. They just don't work. It's not a problem. I haven't had a lockdown problem with this shoe, but I tend to be a runner who likes to really crank down my shoes, and I just can't do that in this shoe. Again, I've not had any heel slip problems. I've not had my foot moving around. I've had no toe crunching problems. It's just I can't get this shoe as tight as I may want, and I have a mid to high volume foot. For a shoe that's meant for a lot of easy general running, that's probably not a bad thing that I can't crank this thing down, because this isn't a race shoe. This isn't a shoe I'm going to race in. So I don't need sort of Superblast ability to crank this down. But it is something to consider. And if you do have a very low volume foot, it may be hard to get a lockdown that you really like in this shoe. And again, I think the big problem is just this overly complicated eyelet chain. So I would love to see this changed in a future version. But is it a deal breaker? No. This shoe does a very good job of securing to your foot. Let's talk about the midsole. And the midsole, I think, is the real magic of this shoe. And I'm not even really talking about the foam yet. I think a lot of the sculpting that you can see in this midsole is really well done. Now, the Novablast 1 had a bit of a reputation to be kind of unstable. And I think Asics designers and engineers have really been trying to add stability back into the Novablast through each version. And a lot of that has come in the heel area because they have a lot of foam that wraps up around the heel and really will help a heel striker, get very well supported, guide their foot forward as they're landing, and get them into the front of the shoe. But I've never felt that there's been a lot of attention paid to the forefoot of the Novablast, and that's changed considerably in this model. If you look at the front of this shoe, you can see that there's now a tiered design to this midsole foam in the forefoot, which gives you a very wide platform, which is very stable and gives you a very nice ride, especially if you're a forefoot striker. This shoe now has a very nice pocket in the forefoot. But I also think the sculpting of the sidewalls here contributes to the ride of this shoe with the foam. FF Blast Plus Eco is still a soft foam. It's still, I would consider it a squishy foam. But where it differs to me is that it's more bouncy and it's less mushy. Now, I really enjoy FF Blast Plus foam when it's combined with something else. When it has a carbon plate like in the Magic Speed 3, or it's combined with FF Turbo like in the Superblast, I think FF Blast Plus foam is brilliant. Its qualities pair with those carbon plates or the firmer FF Turbo foam exceptionally well. When it's just a big block of it, like in the Novablast 3, I just found it became too mushy. Now, FF Blast Plus Eco, for me, isn't doing that yet. Granted, I only have 30 miles or about 50K on this shoe. I'm going to put a lot more miles into this shoe, so I will be back with an update on how this shoes. But right now, out of the box, it feels great, and I still get a lot of bounce. Now, something else that I think is contributing to that is the other big change here is that the toe rocker and toe spring in this shoe, and the rocker is how much the outsole or the bottom of the shoe is curving up, and the toe spring is actually how much the area where your toes are sitting curves up. Both of those are considerable, and I believe they move both of them forward. So this has a much more aggressive ride, which again contributes to this being a much better shoe for a forefoot striker. The Novablast 3 could feel very slappy for a forefoot striker like myself, because the rocker in that shoe was much more mild and it was much further back. It worked very well for a heel striker where they could land and roll forward, but now this shoe, I think, really is engineered for much better for a forefoot striker. And as I said, that creates a very defined pocket in the front of the shoe, which feels great. And if we go to the outsole in this shoe, the trampoline effect thing is still here. Now, one of the things I disliked intensely in the Novablast 3 was this thing, this trampoline effect, because I always felt it in my foot. It always felt like it was poking up in my foot. In this shoe, I've never felt this once, and I've done some longer runs in this. The longest run I've done in this shoe right now is about 15K, so not the longest run out there, but definitely long enough where if this is going to be a problem, I would have felt it, and I didn't feel it. But what I do feel is I do feel the spring of this thing, because when I land in this new pocket in the forefoot of the shoe, I'm definitely feeling that trampoline effect, especially with these tiers, centering my foot out. Again, I'm landing like this, and it's really giving me that kind of pop that I think this was always meant to do that I never felt, but now I'm feeling it in the shoe, and it feels really nice. So well done there, Asics. You've redesigned this thing to work for forefoot strikers. Thank you. Moving to the outsole of this shoe, we definitely do now have more rubber on the bottom of this shoe. And this is Asics' Ahar rubber, which is a much grippier rubber. And I think they learned a lot from the sparseness of the rubber that was on the Novablast 3, and they've definitely beefed it up a bit more. And the pattern is much more similar to what was on the Superblast, which I think is a really good thing. And I believe the Ahar rubber is a similar formula. I think this is a more open formula than what was on the Superblast. But as far as grip on paved surfaces, concrete, and I would say even dirt paths, dirt roads, you're totally fine. But one of the things that I do think is a limiter of this shoe is this outsole, because for a proper daily trainer in my book, and I've talked a lot about this on this channel, I want an outsole that I can take to any surface. And I would not take this outsole on gravel roads, heavily rocked roads with a lot of rock in them. I would think if you're running in this in winter in the Northeast where there's a lot of salt on the road and just a lot of grime on the shoulder of a road, this is going to get cut up. And I would never, ever bring this shoe on a trail. Those are things I want a daily trainer to do, but I don't have to have them to do that. As far as this shoe's performance on road, on paved surfaces, and again, light dirt, I think you're totally fine. I've also run in this in wet, in slippery, on leaves. I'm actually getting better grip on this, and I'm actually, for road running, I don't have any problems with the grip on this shoe, and it is definitely an upgrade from the Novablast 3. Let's talk about the ride finally. And this, I think, is where this shoe really shines. Now, as a runner, I don't like max cushion, very soft foams, rockered shoes. I've never found one that I've really liked until I ran in this shoe. I love how this shoe feels. Finally, for the first time, I have a max cushion shoe with a lot of rocker in it, especially toe rocker, that I feel works for my stride and doesn't get in the way. Some of that has to do with how they've moved the pivot point of the rocker forward in this shoe. Some of it I think has to do with FF Plus Eco being less mushy, a little bit more structured. And again, the sculpting of these sidewalls, the medial and lateral sides of the midsole, I think also help land your foot, center my foot, and help me really get the most out of this toe rocker and the toe spring to roll forward. Now, I'm a forefoot striker, and I've loved how this shoe has felt. The other thing I'm going to say about this shoe is, again, on longer runs, and the longest run I've done in this shoe so far is about 15K, not the longest run, but this shoe never flattens out. The Novablast 3, I would feel the toe spring or the toe rocker in that shoe a little bit, and it was much less extreme than what's in this shoe, but it would flatten out to me, and I would just feel the trampoline effect all the time. I don't get any of that in this shoe. This shoe just feels smooth, and it just keeps rolling forward no matter no matter how far I run or no matter what pace I'm doing. Now, this is a shoe that I'm going to use for easy running. I'm in a base building phase right now, and this is the perfect shoe for what I'm looking for that, where I'm just doing a lot of easy running. I'm just adding volume. I'm building volume into my legs. And this shoe just rolls me forward, and it feels great. I have done some faster running. I've gotten up to half marathon pace in this shoe. It does it, but it's not going to be the first choice for that. But what I will say and is unique about this shoe is generally when I'm running faster, when I'm getting into half marathon or 10K pace in a overly rockered shoe, the shoe just gets in the way. All of the foam and the rocker just get in the way. That's why I like a more traditional feel shoe for that faster stuff. This shoe doesn't get in the way. It's just I keep finding it rolling me forward in a very nice way. This isn't going to be the shoe I'm going to pick for faster running. But for easy running and approaching marathon pace, you know, within 10, 20 seconds of marathon pace, and anything slower than that, this shoe is extremely comfortable, which makes it an ideal, I think, bulk trainer. This is where I would begin to call this a daily trainer. Again, I don't think the Outsole has the versatility of what I traditionally want in a daily trainer, but for road running and just getting all of those miles in, this is an exceptional shoe for that. Additionally, I think heel strikers are still going to love this shoe because this shoe now has a redesigned bevel in the heel. It's going to make the heel strike smoother, and you're going to roll forward more into this shoe. And when you engage this trampoline effect and you engage the new toe rocker in the shoe, it's just going to feel very rolly heel to toe, which is going to feel really good. And I think this is where FF Blast Plus Eco is working really well. Like I said, it's still soft, it's still squishy, but it's not mushy. Again, a lot of that is the sculpting of the sidewalls in this shoe, but I think just the foam being a little bit more dense is just going to work better for a lot more types of runners, a lot more foot strikes, especially forefoot strikes. Is it as versatile as the Novablast 3? Well, I never got versatility out of the Novablast 3, but I could see where this shoe is not going to be as good for faster stuff. Like I said, you can do that, but it's not going to be my first choice. But a shoe this big with this much foam and this much rocker, I don't want it to do faster stuff. I'm going to go to something like the Superblast for faster work, or I'm going to go to a proper plated shoe for faster running. But for bulk miles, getting those easy miles in and just rolling forward in a very comfortable, very controlled, very smooth way, this shoe is ideal. So there you go. I love the Novablast 4, and I'm shocked I'm saying that. Not only over a Novablast, because I never thought I would like the Novablast series, but over a high stack, max cushion, soft foam, heavily rockered shoe. I just never thought that was my thing until I ran in this shoe, and I'm really enjoying running in this shoe. Now, I'm going to make a few more videos on this shoe. The next two videos on this channel will be a comparison between this and the Novablast 3 because there's more to talk about there. And the video after that will be a comparison between this and the Superblast because there's a lot to talk about there. What I will say about this shoe in regards to the Superblast, though, is that if you thought the Superblast was overpriced for what it was, there's a lot more value here for what you're paying for. You're getting about 75-80% of the feel of the Superblast in the Novablast 4, and I think that's a really good thing for more runners. Additionally, the other criticism of the Superblast was that it was overly stiff. This shoe is not overly stiff. It's not mushy, but it's not overly stiff. So for easier running, for the slower pace stuff, this is going to be the better option for most people because you're getting 75-80% of the feel of the Superblast in a softer, more usable platform for easier running. Now, this isn't a race shoe, but it doesn't need to be. This Superblast exists. And that's where I think this shoe is really exciting because it's setting the precedence for what we're going to see across the Asics running line in 2024, leaning more into more foam, more rocker shoes, especially in the toe area. But also, I think this opens the door for Asics to make the Superblast more racy, properly racy. And I have a video on my thoughts on that, which I'll put a link in the description too, if you're interested in that, because I think this opens the door for a lot of cool changes for the Superblast. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. If you like this type of content, consider subscribing because you see more content like this pop up in your feed. If not, drop a like on this video because it helps this channel continue to grow, which I always appreciate. And with that, I'll catch you in the next one.